You were 18, you got kicked out of your house. What was that like?
But when I was told to leave, and at first I thought, well, maybe they're kidding. Being the way I was brought up, if my dad would say something and you ever said anything back, you get backhanded across the face, get punched in the chest. When he said that, I didn't say anything, but I started getting prepared. I sort of said, hey, I'm leaving, and expecting like, well, maybe he's going to say no, but that wasn't the case. I drove off. As I'm driving away that day, I was crying and I was thinking, wow, why is these things happening to me? It's the way life was. I just parked my car on the side of the road there and I would sleep in my car.
During your time in Denver, you got a phone call.
On that phone call, it was from the Red Cross, but I answered the phone. Then they said, hey, there was an accident in my family. There was a number of people in my family that had died. I needed to get back to Maine to help sort through some of the issues. The kitchen carpet was tore up and the wallpaper was all tore down. You could see where some things had been broken and some things had been damaged in the house. Had I been there when he was shooting people, chances are I'd be dead today.
We're here in your garage, looking at the Viper.
Yeah, cool car.
Done pretty well for yourself. You've got a really cool garage.
Yes, yeah. Thank you.
What was the avenue that you did to get to the financial success that you've gotten to? Like, how did you get to where you are now?
I will say, when I was younger, I certainly thought life was everything that hard work and everything I did on my own. I certainly had that mentality and certainly relied on myself and my own intuition and my hard work to get where I was, to where I am. What I began to realize as I was growing up and getting older, probably into my mid-30s, at that time I probably had 12 really cool cars similar to this. They weren't Dodge Vipers. They didn't make them back then. But I had a lot of cool cars. And I reflected on life, take time when you get older, and reflected, and I thought, wow, what's all this stuff I have? What does it really mean? How does it really impact anything we do and live our lives? And from that, became more of a consistent churchgoer and started going to services every week and sort of found that those things are really all meaningless because when we leave this place where we're living, and life here is short for all of us. Doesn't matter if you live here for 1 year or even if you live here for 100. In the big scheme of things, life is pretty short. And so what I began to realize was through my life, because of the things that were happening, it was just too coincidental that good things were coming my way. And so you begin to realize that someone is there walking with you. And different people might have different views on that, but what I came to learn it was that, hey, my relationship with Jesus is really something that helps me in my day-to-day life, and it helps me become to where I am today.
Yeah. And what was how did you get to the point where you did have all this stuff, where you were a pretty poor boy before, living out of your car? Like, how did you go from that to having 12 supercars in your garage?
Well, I didn't have 12 in my garage at that time, but I did have 12. My garage was a little smaller then. It wasn't in this house I was at. Back then, like I said, I thought it was everything I was doing. And so I was working hard. I'd work 2 full-time jobs and a part-time job. And in some respect, when you're working like that, it's hard to get into a lot of trouble because you're busy from the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed. But I was always one of those that could think a little differently than others and sort of see that I could take some risk and I could see some long-term planning. I was never really short-sighted. And those are the type of things I think that are gifts that, God gives us. Some people might say your guardian angel is with you at all times, and maybe that's true. I don't know 100% for sure. But I will say that life worked out too well for me. There was too many bad things that could have happened that didn't. And I do attribute that to a power greater than just myself. So, if you'd like to hear a life story from when I was first, when I first graduated high school and left home to where I'm at today, we could step there or wherever you'd like to go.
Yeah. I mean, first off, I'd like to comment on what you said about material stuff doesn't matter. I mean, I think for a lot of people my age, I think material stuff really does matter. It seems like it matters. But the best analogy I've ever heard for money and stuff is we all sit down at a poker table and we get our hand, we play our chips, and then at the end, instead of cashing out our chips, death knocks on your shoulder and he says it's time to go, and you just push all the chips back onto the table and everyone continues to play without you. You can't take any of it out with you, which I really like that analogy. That speaks to me into how the stuff doesn't really matter.
It's so true what you just said. The thing I think most people don't realize is we hear society norms saying the ones with the most toys win. We hear a lot of cliches similar to that. What I've found is, and the reason why I still have some cool cars, I have a number of them here, is because it allows me to meet other people that I probably wouldn't meet if I didn't have these cars. And what it allows me to do is it allows me to show that you can have a cool car like this and still have faith. And so when we go on rallies and other road trips with other people, though the cars are what sort of our common denominator, what sort of sets us aside is I let people know that, hey, I plant a seed and I let them know that, hey, on Sundays we're churchgoers and we're going. And I invite others that are in our group, hey, if they'd like to go, hey, why don't you come with us and see? And it's surprising that typically on most rallies or most events we go, we'll get at least one other couple to go with us. And so it opens the door and it gives them an opportunity to see that, hey, this is going to be something that's going to be beneficial in your life. Where if we didn't have these cars, we wouldn't have these interactions with these other people.
Yeah. So earlier you mentioned that, I don't remember exactly what you said, but you said it's hard for people with like a lot of stuff or nice cars to be good Christians or something along those lines. Yeah. Why'd you say that?
Well, what happens is it depends what your focus is in life. And so obviously when people have money, often their focus is money focused. And so instead of doing always the right thing, and I don't know if the right thing would be called the godly choice, what it is they look at how do they maximize the money that they have or money potential they can gain. And so instead of making what I would call the right choice, the Christian choice, the right, with values, with ethics, what people will sometimes do is they will cut that short because they're looking to maximize their profit. And I'm not saying that even myself in the early days that I did everything, that I'm proud of every choice I made. Knowing what I know today, I certainly would have done things differently. But that was my life journey, and we're all on a journey, and all you can do is gain wisdom and reflect back and say, hey, I'm going to do it different moving forward.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, the biggest thing is if people, and if you want to know what your real focus is, look at what you spend your money on. And if you spend your money on helping others, if you spend your money on buying more toys for yourself, that's really where your focus is. And I think that if people just took a step back and looked at that, that would give them some perspective on life. Unfortunately, what happens is, especially when we're younger, we're more in survival mode. And in survival mode, we're just trying to make it day to day. When you get to be a certain age where you, finally have, I've never made a car payment. And when I've bought a house, I'm the type that pays it off. So I pay it off 5 years or less. If you can live debt free, it allows you to take some perspective and see what's going on in the world and what is important in life and in the world, and what is meaningless and what has meaning in your life.
Yeah. What were some of those things that you said you would have done differently?
So, when we spoke earlier yesterday, I told you when I first came to Denver back in 1974, I got a job at a fiberglass place. And at the fiberglass place, we worked on Corvettes. And the cars that came in were typically the 1963 to 1967 Corvettes. Now, we did get some of the next generation. I think it's like Generation 3, but it was typically mostly those. And we put flares and all types of things. And because I was working there, and at the time I was 19, everyone that left their car overnight, I told you, all of us guys would take them out for a joyride. Certainly not the thing to do. Certainly not condoned. Certainly I knew better not to do that, but it was just some of those things you do. And when you reflect back, well, why'd you do it? Well, it was fun. And, but I certainly wouldn't do that today. I'm sure that there's people out there, I don't know specifically, but I'm sure there's people out there I could have done a helping hand or done some things better when I interacted with them, and I didn't.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Was there anything in regards to money that you made the incorrect choice, as you said, or you didn't make the right choice because you were thinking about money or stuff?
Well, I do know, because I'm a business owner and I've owned a number of businesses, one of the things I did looking today, I was always looking at myself first. And the way I managed money in the early days as a business owner, I paid myself first and then my employees second. And so what that meant to me is their salary was based on the profits that was left over from mine. Looking at today, I probably would have done that a little differently.
Yeah.
I probably would have started their salary, hey, here's what your value is. And later in life, before I retired, most of my employees were commission-based. And by having them commission-based, it meant that the amount of effort they put in, it was directly proportional to the amount of salary they were paid.
Yeah.
And to me, I really think that lets people be in charge of their own destiny. And knowing what I know today, that's probably something I should have done earlier on than when I did.
Yeah. Yeah. You also said that you had a life that went a little bit too well, but it also started not going well from the onset. When you were 18, you got kicked out of your house. What was your initial reaction to getting kicked out? And in regards to your parents or in regards to the world, what was that like?
Oh, wow, that was a long time ago. So I was kicked out at 18. I graduated high school, luckily. And so at the time, I was one of those types of people that actually looked, and like I told you earlier, I felt probably from the age of 15, certainly by the age of 16, I felt I could make better decisions than my parents and better decisions than a lot of other adults. And so I was always looking and analyzing some of the choices they'd make. And if I ever asked them, why did they make this choice? They just, shut me down, give me some, shut up or some other excuse. But those are the type of things you learn that, hey, that's helps you to understand some of the choices you make. But anyways, to answer your question, when I was kicked out of the house, I was told on a Wednesday to leave, and I left that Saturday, and I had about $200 of money in hand, cash money. Back then, people did have checking accounts. They certainly didn't have credit cards back then. It was cash money is what most people used, and checking accounts. Well, I had cash money, about $200 that I left home with. And I left home with a Mustang that I bought, a 1965 Mustang that I bought from a junkyard there in Maine. And I fixed that car up before I left. And it was my daily driver was a 6-cylinder with a 3-speed, really a junker of a car. But, when you're a kid, that's all I could afford.
But it was a Mustang.
But it was a Mustang. And like I told you, when you back in that generation, what was important to guys was having a cool car. You wanted some. Now mine was a 6-cylinder, so it wasn't that cool. But back in Maine, I never knew a Mustang had a V8 because every one I ever saw there were all only 6-cylinder ones. So anyways, but when I was told to leave, and at first I thought, well, maybe they're kidding, but being the way I was brought up, if my dad would say something and you ever said anything back or tried to push back a little bit, either you get backhanded across the face, get punched in the chest, get punched in the shoulder, get kicked, one of those things. So when he said that, I didn't say anything, but I started getting prepared. And when Saturday came, I sort of said, hey, I'm leaving, and expecting well, maybe he's going to say no, or, I wasn't really that serious about this. But that wasn't the case. So I drove off, and we lived in northern Maine. Before we got to Maine, my parents were in the military. My dad was in the military. We lived in Okinawa, and I graduated high school in Okinawa in 1973. And after I graduated high school, my dad got stationed in northern Maine, Loring Air Force Base. Very, very cold place to live. Not a great place for families, but it is what it is. And so when I left, as I'm driving away that day, I was crying, and I was thinking, wow, why is these things happening to me? And but it's the way life was, and there wasn't any cell phones. I did have a girlfriend when I was in high school, and I felt we were pretty serious. At the time we said we loved each other and all the rest of that. And we're married, and we'll be married almost 50 years coming up. But that's a little segue into that story. So I left home, drove in my car, drove out to see my girlfriend. At the time, her folks got stationed in Riverside, California, which is a lot nicer than Loring Air Force Base in Maine. Oh, boy, it was. I stayed with her a month, almost 30 days, and her parents wanted us to get married. And they weren't really pressuring us really bad, but they kept throwing the hints out. Well, what's your plans? What's your idea? And when you have your girlfriend with you, it's really hard because you're comfortable. It's really hard to do the things you need to do. And so at that point, I knew I needed to leave. And I needed to leave because I just couldn't stay there and live off of them. Yeah. That wasn't the way I was born. And the nice thing about being there was, your girlfriend's doing your laundry, and, you're getting fed, and you don't have to worry about any of that. When I drove from Maine out to California, you drive through the day. Heaven forbid you don't want to drive at night. Something might break down on your car and you can't see. So I would pull over and sleep in my car on the side of the road, on an off-ramp or an on-ramp, or on some of the roads back east. The median between the interstate was really wide. I would just pull into the median and sleep in my car back then. So like I said, it was a different time, and you'd stop at a gas station when you got gas, oil and water, and you check your tire pressures, and you'd always check the map and see about how close you were on target. And sometimes, it got a little off track, but you sort of look at a paper map. And some gas stations back then actually gave you the paper maps. If I had to buy one, I never did. It was an expense I didn't want to spend it on. So, so I left my girlfriend's house. That was Joan, who's my wife. And like I said, we've been married almost 50 years. And I headed back east. I had a friend who lived next door to me when I lived in Okinawa, and his name was Rob. And he lived in Colorado Springs. So I thought, hey, I'm going to come out to visit him, and maybe we'll get an apartment or a place together. And which is surprising about this is we all left at about the same time. Your tour of duty in Okinawa is about 3 years, is for a military guy. So every 3 years we were moving as a family. And when I went to my friend's house, obviously no cell phones, so you don't call.
You just knock on the door.
You just knock on the door, exactly. It was, people don't realize how convenient your cell phone is. You text, hey, I'll be there in 5 minutes. That isn't the way it was. You would send a letter, they would get it maybe a week later. And I don't even remember if I sent him a letter. Obviously, I got his address somehow, so we must have corresponded by letter some way. And but I did have his address. And so I drove from Riverside, California, all the way to Colorado Springs. And I did have his phone number. And so when I got to Colorado Springs, I stop at gas stations and get directions on where this address is and how to get there, look on a map. And I show up at his house, bang on his door, and it's like, hey, I'm here, And his parents were like, well, geez, what are you doing here? And this was probably about 11 o'clock in the morning, is what I remember. And I was thinking as I was driving there, oh, they're going to invite me to lunch and then we'll talk. And when her parents said that, it was like, wow. So what ended up for me, I think I stayed maybe 15 minutes after driving that far. Maybe I think it took me 2 or 3 days from Riverside, California to get there. I got back in my car and I said, geez, where should I go? And that's why I went to Denver, because I thought, hey, I could get some opportunities in Denver. So, and then in Denver, what I did is, still staying in my car, because that's all I really knew and had. That was my property. And every worldly possession I owned at that point was in the trunk of my car, because that was the only thing in my car that locked. My doors, I could lock them on the inside if I was sitting inside, but if I was outside, I couldn't lock the inside of my doors because my key didn't work on the outside. It's just the way things were back then. And so what I went ahead and did is when I was there in Denver, the sort of industrial area was off about Santa Fe to Federal, from about Dartmouth to maybe Hampton. In that area was heavy, I will say, manual labor type work. And so I stopped at a shop. I just walked in. I says, hey, are you looking for any help? I'm looking for a job. And the guy at the place said, well, hey, what can you do? I says, well, geez, whatever you need me to. Excuse me. And so I said, hey, I'm sure I can, whatever. And so they had me start on the night shift that day. And I was making like aluminum parts. So it was like you pour melted aluminum into a mold, and then it would harden and kick it out, and then you trim the flash off, put it in a box. And it was really hot. So this was probably now July, August, and it was hot even at night to do that. So I was thinking, how did the people do this through the day? So after I was doing that job a couple days, because it was at night, through the day I was looking for other jobs. And so what I found is I was driving down Colfax, and Colfax was a busy street even then here in the Denver area. There was a car place, and it was called Allied Fiberglass. And so I pulled up there with my Mustang, and I went inside, and they had a bunch of Corvettes around the place. And I asked them if they were hiring or if they needed any help. Mm-hmm. And they told me, because there was quite a few 63 to 67 Corvettes in the area. It was a pretty big place. And they said, hey, if I could fix the electric headlights, where the headlights rock, or when you turn the headlights on, they rock her up and come on, mm-hmm. as opposed to into the body, they said I'd have a job. So they didn't offer me any money at the time. It was just, hey, if you can do this, hey, well, why are you? So I went ahead and I had a few tools that I don't know, they might call them clubs today, but they were called tools to me back then. And they had some tools in the shop. And so I looked at my first Corvette. I don't remember what year it was, but I know it was a 63 to 67. Could have been, any one of those years. All the headlights worked the same. And so after a couple hours, I had taken the headlight out. I saw it's electric motor. They get water in them, they corrode a little bit. And, with a piece of like emery cloth, clean up the armature on them. It wasn't really that big a deal once you sort of saw how it works. And my car had a generator in it. It was an early 65 Mustang, had a generator. And I'd rebuilt the generator in it. And it was essentially the same type of electrical device as those electric headlights. And so it was really pretty easy once I got it apart. I spent about 2 hours, I got it working. I showed them, they were amazed. And they said, hey, I was hired. Now, back then, this was 1974. They were paying me, I don't even know if I got $2 an hour. I think it was $1.60, but it might have been $2 an hour. And so I don't know what they were charging for my work, but anyways, that's what I was getting paid. And I did work on Corvettes, and it was fun. As a young guy, all those Corvettes that I worked on, I remember, were all manual. They were all 4-speed cars. And we put fender flares on them. We did all types of little different mechanical things. And the cars were really pretty basic back then. So anyways, I could go a little further and deep on that if you're mechanically, want to know more. But essentially, that was my job. And I worked there for a number of years. So that was where that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at some point during your time in Denver, you got a phone call.
Yeah. So one thing to note, when I was working at that fiberglass place, people might want to know, well, where'd you live? Well, I still lived in my car. And what I did is just really quickly, through the day, I would work on the cars. And at night, after work, or if they had extra hours that I could work, I would actually stay and I would work later because I could make a little more money. But then I would go to either City Park, Cheeseman Park, Washington Park, and I'd just park my car on the side of the road there. And I would sleep in my car. And then in the morning, what I would do is I would run down off Colorado Boulevard at about just past I-70, probably at about 60th Avenue, I'll say, 58th or 60th, there was a hotel on the west side of the street. And back then, they didn't use credit cards to open and close the doors. You actually had to have a key. And I would just pull up, and if a door was open, I'd just run in and take a shower. And most of the time, there was a dry towel, but sometimes there wasn't. And it was just, back then, I was young, and it was nice because they had a flush toilet and all the rest of that stuff. And it was just what you did. And they never gave me any grief about it. They'd always have like a bar of soap, one of those little small ones back then. And people don't believe it, but that's how it was back then. And the way I found that hotel was when I was working at the aluminum shop, I would go to... because I worked at night, through the day it gave me time. And so when I drive around in my car, I found that hotel. I saw a couple others, but that one really worked well. And I used that for probably well over a month, maybe close to 2 months. So anyways, the incident you're talking about, I'd probably been working at that fiberglass place for a few months. They liked me there because I was one of those hardworking guys. And if they needed anything extra done, I was always the one to do it because I was looking to make extra money. And because I wanted to move into some place, an apartment, because I knew in the wintertime when it gets cold, it's going to be a little tough to sleep in my car. So I just got in an apartment about a week later, and it was a 1-bedroom, and they called it furnished. And furnished meant that it had a couch and maybe a chair or maybe a dining table in it. Furnished didn't mean it had a bed. So I had a sleeping bag because I was in the Boy Scouts from way back when, and so that's what I used as my bed at that time. There was no dressers or anything in that place. But anyways, I got a phone call, and on that phone call, it was from the Red Cross, and I never had a phone call at work. So when the owners came and said, Bob, you have a phone call, I'm thinking like, what? Who even knows I work here? I'd certainly never given the phone number out, because who's going to call me? But I answered the phone, and they asked to identify myself, which I did. And then they said, they were the Red Cross, and they said, hey, there was an accident in my family. I don't remember all the specifics, but I do know the key parts. They told me there was a number of people in my family that had died, and that I needed to get back to Maine to help sort through some of the issues. Realized I was just a kid. I didn't shave. I didn't have hair. I was just. I cut my own hair with a pair of scissors. I certainly didn't go to a barber shop or any of that.
Do you still do that?
No, I go to Great Clips, or my wife, if it gets too messy, I'll have her trim it. But so anyways, when I was talking to them on the phone, they identified themselves as the Red Cross, that there was this tragic accident or tragic problem that had happened back in Maine. I had no idea what it was. I hadn't had any communication with any of my family since I'd left back in, we'll say, June 1st. And now this is already, this is October, I'll say this is. And so I said, well, geez, I don't have any money. I can't drive back, because back then the speed limit wasn't, 75 where you could go 85 or 90. The speed limit was 55. And the cars back then, part of the reason why the speed limit was 55, that was about as fast as those old cars would go. They just didn't have, the reliability or the power to go a lot faster. Anyways, they said that they'd be more than happy, excuse me, to supply me a one-way plane ticket to Maine. And at the time I was thinking, wow, one-way plane ticket, that sounds great, but how the heck am I going to get back? And then I think, what about my job here? I got a good thing going. I certainly don't want to mess that up. So I said, let me just take a minute here and let me see what I can find out. So I set the phone down. I talked to the owners, and the owners, I think, were Monty and Mark. They were two brothers. They were older than me, probably twice my age. Maybe they were 30 and I was 19 at the time. And I asked them, I says, hey, could I be gone for a couple weeks for this? And they said, sure, take the time you need. And so they got back on the phone, and I said, hey, my work here says it's going to be all right. Let me go ahead and take you up on that offer for a free ticket. And they said, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe they said something to the effect, just go to the airport, and it was Stapleton, is what the one off about 35th in Quebec. Go to the airport, and at the TWA ticket counter, you'll have a ticket for you. And I think it was TWA, not 100% sure, but I believe it was. And so right away, the clothes I was wearing, I just got in my car and left and drove to the airport without a bag, without anything. I didn't go home, didn't anything. And it should be interesting to note, when I was growing up, I never learned how to do laundry, so I never did. What I would do is about once every few weeks, I'd go to Goodwill, and I'd buy 5 pairs of pants and 5 shirts, and the pants were like $0.25 each, and the shirts were, 10 or 15 cents. And I wasn't too picky on what I'd buy, just as long as it was sort of fit. I sort of put them on, but the pants weren't jeans that they sold back then. They were all dress pants. Maybe with a plaid suit pants, bell bottoms, whatever. And I used those, and I'd mix and match the shirts and the pants as long as I could for a number of weeks. And when they got too dirty, too corrody, too whatever, I just threw them out and buy another set. And that's what I sort of did. And so obviously no socks, no underwear, no T-shirts, because they didn't sell that stuff there. And so anyways, here it is. I was at work. I have my work clothes, I'll call it on, go to the airport. And when I got there, I don't remember what it was, 1, 2 in the afternoon. The flight was for the next day. So I didn't go home. I just stayed the night at the airport in Stapleton. And the next day, caught the flight. We flew it was nonstop from Denver to Boston. And then at Boston, it was a propeller, a crop duster plane is what I call it. And there was a handful of us on it that we flew from Boston to Portland, Maine. And so we got into Portland. I remember it was at night. And I'm thinking, how the heck am I going to get to it was my grandparents. They told me it was Lewiston, Maine is where I was going. And I did have the address to my grandparents, and I knew their phone number, but I'm thinking, what the heck am I going to do? Anyways, I get off the plane, and I walk out, and I see my mom's brother. His name was Ray, and he was there. And it's a really, really small airport. The airports back then aren't like today. You didn't have security, you could walk around. That airport was probably the size of my current house. There wasn't anything special there. You landed on the pavement, and you got out. You walked on the pavement to a door. You walk inside, and then you're inside what looked like maybe a farmhouse.
Yeah.
Anyways, he was there. And I said something to him, and he says, "Here, we need to go." So we went to my grandparents' house. And he talked to me a little bit about it on the way, and he said, what I recall him saying is my dad was dead, my grandparents had died, and my mom and my three brothers that were still at home were all in the hospital from gunshot wounds. So I didn't really know everything that was going on. And, at my age, 19 at the time, what do we really know about life? So anyways, I get to my grandparents' house, and my mom had a total of 7 kids in her family. So her parents had 7 kids. And all seven with the exception of my mom, they were all there. And they were all upset, and I'm trying to sort out what's going on. So anyways, what I found out when I was gone, when I'd been kicked out of the house. And I got to say that life was never simple for us in the military, because having a military life, my dad felt he was the king of the house. And instead of us being children, we were more like his troops. And when he told us to do something, we were supposed to do it immediately. And if we didn't, we'd get some type of something painful happened to us. And it wasn't just for us, but it was also for my mom. And I remember when we were overseas in Okinawa, and I could drive a number of times, I'd taken my mom to the hospital. But the military at the time didn't do anything about it, and there wasn't anything about domestic violence or any of that we have today. So those things are certainly better today, and those things wouldn't happen today. But anyways, what had happened was, after I was kicked out of the house and left, my mom decided, at a time when my dad was out on TDY, that was temporary duty, he had to fly someplace, and he was gone like for a month. So she packed up herself and my 3 brothers. And my 3 brothers was the one next younger than me. He was 2 years younger. The next one was 4. And the next one was close to 10 years younger than me, I think 10. It was either 9 or 10. And she packed him, and she moved him to my grandparents. And in northern Maine, Loring to Lewiston, I should have looked this up, but it's probably 250 miles, maybe more, but it's quite a drive. And so I don't know how she did all that, but when I went to my grandparents' house, a lot of our personal effects were everywhere in the house. All the stuff that my parents had owned. And my mom took the things that she felt were hers and moved them to my grandparents' house. So my mom's siblings were understandably very, very upset. When you walk into my grandparents' house, you walk into the kitchen area. And what I remember was the kitchen carpet was tore up. The walls, back then, a lot of people used wallpaper because the walls weren't finished the way they were, and the wallpaper was all tore down. You could see where some things have been broken and some things have been damaged in the house. Anyways, what I found out was, because my mom had left and moved in with her grandparents, my dad, when he got home, he didn't like that, or felt that, hey, the world had ended in the way he understood it. And and so we had a couple of handguns. I don't know all the particulars because obviously I wasn't there. These are things I heard. Had a couple of handguns, went to see my grandparents because that's where my mom and my brothers were. And when my grandparents opened the door, he came in and he shot and killed both of them. Well, then there was chaos in the house because my mom and my three brothers were there. So my dad went through the house and he shot my mom a few times, shot my brother just younger than me, the one who's 2 years younger, he shot him twice. My other two brothers each got shot once. And my mom left when my dad was chasing my brothers. My mom got up and ran to one of the neighbors. And the neighbor's house wasn't very close. It's not like they're, 20, 40 feet or 50 feet from one door to the next. Because where they lived, it was more rural Maine. It was probably, I would say, probably closer to maybe 100 yards. It was quite the distance to someone else's house. Anyways, my mom ran there, and my dad, when he saw her gone, he chased out after. And when he chased out after, when she got to the neighbor came out to try to defuse or stop what was going on. It's my dad shot and killed that person also. That is what happened. And what I found out was that happened at least 2 or 3 days before I arrived. So it took the Red Cross a little bit of time to find me. My mom's brothers and sisters, I think there was only one of them that lived still in Maine. All the rest had moved out of state, but all of them were there. All of them had set themselves up in my grandparents' house. And because they had lived there as kids, they all had their rooms again. And what they had done in their rooms that I noticed was they had walked around the house and saw a lot of my mom's things, and they had picked up and put them in their rooms. I'm speculating that it could have been my mom had decorated the house, but I sort of doubt it. I sort of think they had picked that up and sort of figured it was things they were going to take. So I see this and I'm like, wow, what is really going on? And I find out my mom and my three brothers are at a hospital. And I'm told that my dad is at the coroner's office and I need to make some decisions. And my mom was in intensive care, and so was my brother, just younger than me. My other two brothers, because they'd just been shot once and their wounds weren't that severe, they were okay, and they probably could have left the hospital, but who's going to take care of them? And so it's nighttime, and I'm trying to think, oh my God, what type of a mess am I in? How am I going to get around? And so I look over at my mom's brother, and so at the time I was 19, so he was he was probably 40, maybe 41. And I said to him, hey, that's my mom's car. I want the keys to it because that's going to be my car, and if you want to use it, you have to ask me. And it was a little bit of a power struggle at the time. And they did give me a lot of pushback, but I got the keys from him. And I says, if you need to use it, you need to come ask me. And so I went to like a room in the house where my mom had been. And now I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. But I had to get with the coroner. Luckily, there was two funeral homes close in that town. So one of them had my grandparents and a neighbor in that was deceased. And so it just made sense. My dad went to the other one. It was further away, but it just made sense that, from a small town and as horrific as it was. So I had to do that. I was then, the next morning when I got up, I was looking, where's my dad's car? My mom had a Pontiac station wagon, and my dad, and it was an older one, so this is 1974, and her car was a 1964 Pontiac station wagon. And my dad's car was a 1972 Plymouth Duster. So not a great car either, but it was what they had. And so I was looking for it, didn't see it. My dad and I have the same first name and last name. Our middle name is different. And so I was looking around. I was told that I hadn't talked to any of his family yet because my mom and dad had gone to high school together and they were high school sweethearts and gotten married. My dad's family was also from Lewiston, Maine. His mom still lived in town. His dad was already deceased. And he had two sisters. One of the sisters was still living in town. The other sister was living in New York, and she had already come to town. His brother was in the military, and he was already back in town also. So I found out my dad's car was over at his mom's house. So I called his mom and I said, "Hey, I want to come over and pick up." And I told her on the phone my car, and she said it was her son's car. And I said, "Hey, listen, that car has my name, and in Maine they don't have. It's not a title state, so your car doesn't have a title. It's just based on the registration." And I still had my Maine driver's license. I never changed that to a Colorado one when I was here. So I said, "Hey, if I need to, I'm going to call the police." And they gave me some pushback. But anyways, long story short, I did call the police. I did say, "Hey, I want to go over and pick up my car. It was stolen." Obviously, everyone knew what was going on. So my dad's mom told me if I brought her his ring, his family ring, that I guess it was one his dad gave him, and I never knew this, that, she would be okay. And I didn't talk to his brother, but I did talk to his sisters. And it was pretty sad because they were crying and all the rest of that. But here it is. I'm a 19-year-old kid, can't really take care of myself, and I'm trying to work through these things. Anyways, what I did is went over. I had my mom's brother drive me over in my mom's car. Went in myself. I gave my grandma on my dad's side his ring because I went and picked that up from the coroner, and drove off in his car. I went back to my grandma's house that my mom's was living at. And at the time, had I had a few dollars, or if someone helped me, or things would have been different, I probably would have stayed in a hotel just to be out from under all the stress and what was going on over there. But anyways, so my dad's sister's brother and his mom said they wanted an open casket. And that was really pretty tough because my dad, when he killed himself, he didn't shoot himself in the heart. He shot himself in the side of his face. And when I went to, even though the police knew who they were, I still had to identify the body. And that was, it's still scary thinking about how that was, even today. It's not like they show it on TV, is all I'll say. And so I went ahead and when he was at the funeral home, and I told the staff there, I never realized they're more artists because they do the hair, they do the makeup, and they reconstructed his face, essentially. I had to pick out a nose and an ear. They wanted some pictures. Luckily, my mom had a few pictures around her house. Pictures, another thing people don't realize, everyone probably has 1,000 pictures of themselves and all their family on their phones. That wasn't the way it was back then. You didn't develop all your pictures because it was expensive to do. If you took color pictures, you might have had the negatives done, and then you'd look through the negative of what picture you thought was worth printing, and then out of a roll of 36 that you took a year to take 36 pictures, you might print 5 because it was expensive to do. It wasn't like it is today where it's like 10 cents a print or something. Anyways, I took some pictures, went down, worked with him on trying to pick what parts would work on my dad's face. And we had an open casket for his family because his family wanted. We picked the funeral dates different from my mom's parents. We're from a Catholic family. We had both families went to the same church. So they had the rosary service, the funeral. Obviously, my mom's family, the church was overflowing, was packed. At my dad's, it was not the same experience. I went to both. My mom was in the hospital probably close to 2 weeks because my one brother was still in intensive care, the one that was just younger than me. My other 2 brothers, even though they could leave the hospital, who was going to take care of them? And so the hospital wanted him out, but I told him there was no way I could take care of him. And so, like I said, it was a different time. So the hospital actually let my two brothers, my two youngest brothers, and one was probably 14, 15, and the other was probably 8 or 9, and let them stay in the hospital where my mom was staying in the hospital room. So that was awfully nice of them. So just at about, my mom got out, she was able to get out at about 2 weeks. And that's when we had the funeral for my dad. Because he was active military, they did a military funeral. And for what it was worth, that was nice. The military did that. I did work with them a little bit because I worked with them and my mom. So they had someone from the military that came in. My mom at the time, the military people were going over some benefits he had as a military person. And it was good that the military did all that because I had no money to spend, and I certainly couldn't do anything to try to help out. When I flew out there, I don't remember exactly how much, but I'm sure it might have been $50 I had in my pocket, or maybe $80. But I certainly didn't have any money to spend on anything other than absolute necessities. So once my mom was out, I was hoping things would be better. Because of the way things were there in Maine, it's a small town, and what my dad did not only impacted our family, impacted a neighbor's family. My mom told me there was no way she was going to be able to stay in Maine. Because I was living in Colorado, she thought she was going to move to Colorado. It might sound strange to do that, but realize we were in the military, and every 3 years you're constantly moving. So it wasn't like it didn't sound like it was too extreme of something to do. So what I did is I took my mom's car, her station wagon, I loaded as much stuff as I could. I sort of upset some of her brothers and sisters because everything that I knew that belonged to my mom, I went through the rooms and took, and everything I could jam in that car, I took. And looking back today, I probably didn't need to because the military did move my mom out here, but I thought it was the right thing to do. And when you're young and a kid, what do you really know? But anyways, I drove that car out to Colorado, and it was 3 days, and it was now the end of October, maybe November 1st. I don't remember the exact date. And, so there's snow back east, icy roads, and I'm a kid. And so I'm driving, and when I'm tired, I pull over, stop, and sleep, and then start back up and drive. It was an experience, though I survived it and lived through. It's not something you want to go through if you don't have to. But essentially, my mom and my 3 brothers actually moved out and actually lived in my apartment with me for probably a couple weeks.
Yeah, until the furnished apartment.
My furnished apartment. For a couple weeks when they were able to leave Maine. And they didn't leave Maine until probably sometime in January. Mm-hmm. But I had a carload of her stuff here. So that was November, December. So it was probably 2.5 months before they could actually leave. And they flew out to Colorado. And I went and picked them up in their station wagon that I had. And they, all the rest of their stuff with their other car, the military shipped it to Colorado. Mm-hmm. And when my mom was here, and it was tough for her because she had been shot 3 times in the arm, a few times in the abdomen. She went looking for a house shopping right away, and she was able to find a place in Littleton. At the time, my apartment was in Aurora, and it was off of essentially I-225 and about Colfax, we'll say, out east Aurora. And so she found a house down south. I don't know why she picked that location, but she did. And she bought the house on the GI Bill. Mm-hmm. So, essentially no money down, sign your house, sign your name, and you can move in. Which she did, which I thought was great because now I can get rid of all this stuff. And we never were the type of family. We had 5 kids in our family with my mom and dad, so there were 7 of us. And because we were used to the military life, often there was only one bathroom in the house.
Yep.
The military houses weren't like they are today, and they certainly, when you have 5 kids, you don't get a 5-bedroom house with 3 bathrooms or anything really fancy.
Yeah.
So we might have had, I remember most places we stayed at was 2 or 3 bedrooms, with 1 bathroom.
Yeah.
Most of the military housings we stayed at. So anyways, but it was good that my mom moved and helped her pack up and get all that stuff there. And essentially I stayed in the apartment, and essentially I don't know what else to talk on that. We could go into some other details. So one of the things we should have done, another one of those hindsight things. Back then, they didn't do counseling, and I think I told you a little bit about that. I don't know. Do you want me?
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, how did you deal with all of what happened? I mean, I'm 23, and I can't imagine going through that at 19. Like, I can't imagine you had a lot of friends either. You were mostly working in Denver on your own. Like, how did you deal with it? You probably didn't have anyone to talk about it with.
So another thing that's really different in our society today. So the society norm back then was, if something bad happened to you, whatever it might be, there wasn't counseling. And the way it was for all of us through school, and bad things happened to some kids. Some kids had car accidents, died, or parents died. They were in the military. It was, you don't discuss the problems with others. And what the thinking was back then, the reason why you didn't discuss it with anyone else is, your life is a mess or not good. Why would you want to make someone else's life the same? And so because of that, it was just something that wasn't discussed. And so none of my brothers went to any counseling. And, I wasn't shot, and I didn't have to spend any time in the hospital. Yes, I had to deal with a lot of things, but I had nothing of the experience my brothers did. And it's your dad that did these things. Same for my mom. My mom never remarried after this incident happened. My brothers, one of them did get married. The one just younger than me got married, and he was married for maybe a little over a month, and that didn't work out. And all my brothers died early in their lives. So none of us know for sure, but I do believe that what occurred was definitely because of what had happened.
Yeah. Did you ever get a chance to talk to them about it?
It was something we never spoke about. It was something that the things I'm telling you today of how I got my mom's car from my brother, how I got my dad's car from his mom and his sisters and brother, I never even told that to my mom. Picking the things out from the funeral home, it was just something we never spoke about.
Yeah.
My wife and I have been married, like I said, close to 50 years. We might have discussed a few things, but we've never sat down like this and actually, dissected every little piece. Now, she knows a lot of things because, we've been married a long time. But to sit down and discuss it, we never did. We did try to reconcile, like, well, geez, why would your dad do something like this? Why is it... What had happened with my dad was in the military, and he did 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. And Vietnam, we all know, was not a popular war in the U.S. for a number of reasons. Why it wasn't. We won't go into that. But when you're in the military and you're told, here's your tour of duty is here, this is what you do. You don't get a choice. So my dad Went to Vietnam both times for a year. And the first time he went, I think he was, I don't remember his grade, tech sergeant, I will think. My dad, when this all occurred, was in tech sergeant in E5, E6, E6. And when all this happened, my dad was an E9, so chief, that's the highest you can be in the Air Force. He was Air Force. So what people don't realize is, and like I told you, David, bottled water is a fairly new phenomena for our society. Everyone just uses it like, hey, this is normal. We didn't have bottled water. We didn't have water jars. We didn't have water bottles. We didn't have any of that when we were growing up. You might have had a drinking fountain here or there. Most kids drank out of the hose. It was just the way it was. You had a cup. They weren't a sippy cup that you had. You just had a cup. You might have had left that outside from the day before that's in the ground or on the grass. And if you wanted water, you might fill it with the hose or the spigot or whatever. But anyways, when my dad was in the military overseas in Vietnam, obviously they didn't have purified water. It wasn't readily available in a manner that people could drink. So what they did back then was all the military guys drank beer. Now it was 3.2 beer, so that means 3.2% as opposed to the full strength, whatever it is today, 6-7%.
Yeah, 5, 6.
Yeah, or 5 or 6, whatever it is. I don't know. I don't drink because of what had happened. So my dad, that's all he drank was beer. And when you get up, he drank beer. And the first tour, he was okay. My recollection, I told you, I felt we had maybe not a perfect family, but I felt there was happy times, is what I'll say. It wasn't always fighting. It wasn't always, people, having a bone broken or, someone in the hospital because they got beat up or, something bad happened. But the second time when my dad went, when he came back, he was definitely an alcoholic. And he would probably drink, I don't know, I would say a case of beer a day. I don't know if it was that much, but it probably was. And it wasn't 3.2. And back then they didn't drink the beer they have today. It was Schlitz or Hams is what I seem to recall seeing all the time. What's interesting is, even when we lived in Okinawa and we left there in 1973, if you go to the barracks where the GIs were, and this is why I feel strongly for the veterans, that some of the things that's happened to them wasn't all their choice. So in the barracks, this was in 73, when we were over there and I was a dependent, so I was going to high school. If you go into the barracks and they had pop machines, and they'd have Show, Coke, Pepsi, Mountain Dew, Dr. Pepper, I don't know, whatever all the Fresca, I think, was some of the, orange or whatever they had. And you put your nickel or 10 cents in and push the button. What came out was a beer. And it was always Hams or Schlitz. And it didn't seem to matter what pop you pushed, it was just a beer. And that's what they put in the machines. And so all the young guys that were in the military, now it probably wasn't the full strength beer, but it was a 3.2 beer, but that's what they drank. And my jobs when I had over there, I'd work at some of the, I'm trying to think some of the military jobs. It was in warehouse work, most of it, because they were moving stuff in and out of Vietnam. And I do have a lot of pictures that I'd taken back then. They were black and white, so I just did the negatives. You don't print them.
Yep.
But you go to a dark room and print it yourself. So, but anyways, on Fridays, they bring cases of beer in. And if you wanted some water to drink through the day, they'd have a drinking fountain. But out of the half dozen drinking fountains there was always half of them that didn't work. And it was just the way things were. And so, for me as a kid, the drinking containers we had back then was called a thermos. And you had a thermos, generally was for you put your soup in or you put your coffee. You didn't have like a water bottle or a water jug or any of that other type of stuff. It was just a different thing. So for me, because my dad was an alcoholic, I know that's, at least I sort of feel that's why some of the things happened that did. unfortunately.
So whenever you thought about your dad back then, what was your opinion of him? Like, did you like him? Did you think he was a good person? Like, what was your
So,
thoughts around him?
so interesting question. So obviously, things evolve. So when I was younger, I thought we had 5 kids, and I thought my parents were good, and I thought this was the norm. As I was growing up, I could see that, geez, I certainly don't want to live like this, and I certainly don't think this is the right way to be. Things that would occur when we were in North Dakota before we went to Okinawa, so another freezing place to another. Okinawa is a tropical place where it's warm. When we were there, our family was made Catholic Family of the Year. And I used to think, how can they? And, things weren't great then, because that was when my dad had got back from the second tour of duty. And I'm thinking, how can they pick us as Catholic Family of the Year? Now, myself and my brother that was just younger than me, we were altar servers. And so, we worked in the church. And my dad was a lector, so we did read scripture readings in the church. But all in all, if they had all saw what went on behind closed doors, I would call it like World War III most times. Because if you ever said anything, you got punched, you got beat, you got a black eye. And when you went to school looking like that, they never said a thing. They never said, geez, did anything happen? They never asked. And it wasn't just for me, but, my mom was the same. So she'd be wearing sunglasses in the wintertime in North Dakota. So, but they did a write-up on us, our family, and that happened. Earlier years, I think things were good. When my dad got mixed up with alcohol, he never did drugs, as long as I know. In the military, alcohol, it was sort of like something everyone had to drink. Here, have a beer with me. I don't know what the reason was, but it was. It's just, so from my standpoint, I saw that at an early age, and I said, geez, life is tough enough for me. I'm not going to drink ever. And I don't know, I might have had a sip of beer once or twice, but everyone that knows me knows that I just don't drink. I don't care what it is. I just don't need it.
Yeah.
So, anything else along those lines? My mom might have had a drink once in a while, but she never was drunk or anything. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for my brothers. They sort of saw drinking as something fun, and unfortunately, that's attributed to their early death also. So, hopefully, I answered that question. Okay, I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I was just asking if you liked him, I guess.
So the answer was, in the early years, I will say yes, because I figured, but remember in the military, the dads are gone often. So
you didn't see him much.
that often, and he was working. Certainly in the later years, didn't like him, would be saying something nice. So at the time, certainly was worse and didn't like him. At the time, because of some of the things he was doing, not only to other family members, but to myself. And, so, but such is life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did you carry all of this experience going forward? Like, was this in the back of your mind when you moved back to Colorado, you're still working, like, or is this something that you just locked away and you didn't think about?
The way life was then, I mean, opening these doors today, but back then we just put it in a box and just put it away. And why even talk about it? So my mom moved out here, and she lived out here 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And none of her friends knew what happened. She never said, I never told them. And it was just the way life was back then. Most people have no idea the cross people carry through life.
Yeah.
They just see him on the surface, and that's just what they believe. It was a tough time. But back then, from even the church and society as a whole was, hey, you stayed together. This was your family. It would have been nice had there been some men's group that could have been involved and maybe got my dad to change or have some accountability, but that wasn't the way it was back then.
Yeah.
Your problems in your house stayed in your house, and you didn't share those problems with someone else, whatever they were.
Yeah. And
Unfortunately.
do you think it did do you think it did impact the rest of your life, and how it did it do that following those years?
Well, obviously, everything impacts us.
Yeah.
So I joined a number of different men's groups at our church. Because of what had happened, I was very concerned about getting married. But being a young guy, I wanted to be married.
Yeah.
You know, there is some benefits there, not sort of the way life is. And so, but having kids, I was very, very concerned about having kids. And my wife and I, we waited. We were married 7 years before we thought maybe we could overcome some challenges and have a child. And we did. We were blessed with one child. And, you know, sometimes you think, how does life work? How do these things happen? How are opportunities given and not? And those are the ones when you get to be a little older and can reflect on life, you realize someone's actually looking out for you, because so many bad things could have happened so easily, and for whatever reason they didn't. And there's so many things. So back then on cars, you put new tires on a car. Back then we didn't buy new tires, we bought recaps. And and if your recap tire lasted a year, hey, it was a good one. And often the recap would come off, you might get a blowout, all types of bad things happened. And, you know, my old Mustang, it didn't have seatbelts. We didn't drive with seatbelts back then. And it is just amazing that nothing really bad happened to myself or my wife. And it certainly could have. And so when you reflect on life, you see that, geez, somebody, and it wasn't just my choices, somebody was opening doors for me and allowing things to happen. So, and those are things you see differently when you get older. When you're younger and you're in survival mode, it's hard to actually get much perspective because you're just trying to survive the minute.
Yeah.
You're just trying to make it through right now. So, different time. I just know that when I left home, my folks were thinking I should have joined the military. But I felt I'd put my 18 years in, and there was no way was I going into the military.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it. Now,
Yeah.
maybe as an officer I would have.
Yeah. But never in combat.
Oh, well, never as enlisted.
Yeah.
So another thing that people don't realize about the military, at least when I was in the military, because I was enlisted and I graduated high school, they did have school counselors. The school counselors were for the officers' kids. So if you were an officer and you had kids, the thinking was all the officers' kids are going to college. You're enlisted, you're going to go get a job.
Yeah.
It was a total different way of thinking and looking at things. And even though I graduated high school, but I knew I was smarter than a lot of those other people. And back then I felt I wanted to be a physician, a doctor. But that wasn't in the cards because I didn't have any support to help me with that.
Yeah.
It was life. There's nothing to complain about. It's just the way life was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you ever worried you were going to become like your dad?
I was majorly concerned, and it was on the top of my mind, and I certainly did not want to let that happen. Mm-hmm. So something you think about often was that wasn't gonna I wasn't gonna go down that road.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to be like that. I didn't want to follow into that rut. And so I stayed, really tried to make sure I didn't. And like I said, not perfect. But in reflecting back, I can't see any time that I did any of those things. I certainly wasn't physically abusive to any of my kids or my one child, and I certainly wasn't physically abusive to my wife. But you might talk to her and might say I was mentally, I don't know,
Yeah.
playing mind games. I don't know. I don't think so. I tried to be a decent person. But I'll tell you what, it's tough.
Yeah.
Not every day is a sunny day. Yeah, for any of us. So.
Yeah. And did you ever find someone as a father figure or mentor that showed you maybe a different way of doing things?
I think we all find people that are friends. So a lot of our friends early on were older people. Mm-hmm. And I did have a really good friend. His name was Grady. And though I was always handy with cars and I could do things, he actually owned a few gas stations, service stations. And back then, gas stations just didn't pump gas and sell bread, eggs, and milk and all that other stuff. Back then, service stations, you brought your car in because most of the cars were old and, they all need something. They fixed them there. Yeah. And so he owned a few, and he was pretty skilled, and he taught me a lot of things. And I thought he was a good guy, and so him and I bought some cars together. Him and I did some business things together, and he's the age of what my dad would have been. Mm-hmm. He's passed at this point, but he was a good guy, and him and I had a lot of good experience and did a lot of good things. And I had some other older guys that we did some things with, and from my standpoint, I thought it was good. And, see how life evolves for all of us.
Yeah, yeah. And how did you end up going from 19-year-old kid is living in Denver, you had your apartment, your mom moved out, and then at some point you started a business or learned how to do business?
So what I did is like I said, I was always one of those type of people that could do things. Mm-hmm. People... So I'll give a perspective on work. The people today, and I shouldn't characterize everyone, but a lot of people today, what they look at a job as something they have to do, and what they want to do is more vacation time or more time away doing their own. So for me, what I saw as my job as was more my lifestyle. So what I would do is when I was actually working, and so though I started in mechanics and the reason why I did that was I was a high school graduate. Most mechanics back then were not. Mm-hmm. I thought, shoot, if they can work on cars, I'm a high school graduate. I can do at least what they do or better. That was the thinking, my mindset back then. Mm-hmm. And it served me well. What I wanted to do is I wanted to get into, I was good with soldering and I was good with electronics. No formal training that I had, but I could take things apart, see what was wrong and fix them. A lot of things were just by visual because, the things were soldered poorly or, the workmanship was poor. But I did fix a number of things. And so I wanted to do that. So I knew being a mechanic all your life is a hard job. And so what I did is after my mom moved out here, and because my dad died active military, and I still had my ID card, I had it for a few years. So for health, so when I got hurt, various things happened to me, I actually went to a military hospital and they patched me up there, even though I was living on my own. I went to a trade school here in Colorado, and it was called Denver Institute of Technology. They're no longer around, but they were over there off about Evans and Tejon. They had a facility there. And back then, they weren't called computer techs, they were called electronic technicians. And what you did there is you actually fixed anything so it'd be like TVs, VCRs, cassette recorders, radios, any of those things. And one of the things with me, because I had like mechanical experience and I knew how to solder and look at things, I could excel at that, and I did very well. And so like my first real paying job is I worked at AT&T as a electronics technician. And so, but remember, I was one of those that always had more than one job. And so there was a small computer company called Computer System Dynamics that I ran into that just was a startup. They had 4 owners, and I was like employee 1. And so I was their computer technician, fixing computers. So it's changed today. Back then, computers, what was expensive was the hardware. The software was low cost. So when you bought hardware, the way that they sold it back then was whatever the cost of it was. So if it cost $1,000, you sold it typically at least 2. You'd try to get 3 times. So if you paid $1,000, you'd sell it for $3,000. That isn't where it's at today. The margins today is cost plus. So if you bought it for $1,000, you might be able to get 10%, might be able to get 100, maybe 1,100 you sell it for. So anyways, so I worked there, and they flew me around to fix computers. And what I would do is I'd go out there with my soldering iron, I'd go out there with my oscilloscope, my vacuum tube, voltmeter, and a handful of tools. And I would fix circuit boards, I would fix power supplies, it was component level troubleshooting. And what I found pretty quickly was the same components are the ones that typically fail. And so to fix the first one might have taken a while, but if it was the same board to fix the second one, I was quick.
Yeah.
Like 15 minutes, where the first one might have taken a few hours. And because I'd done so many, a lot of people thought I was really good. Anyways, long story short on that, because I was employee 1, that company probably had 75 employees at one time. And like in a lot of small companies, owners get greedy. And owners got greedy and tried to force one owner out. So there's 4 owners, 2 in Salt Lake, 2 in Colorado. So the 2 in Salt Lake, they spun off and did their own thing. They broke with the company here in Colorado. So obviously I was here. So there was 2 owners here. For whatever reason, one owner thought he was the smarter one or whatever. So he kicked the other owner out. And they do that in small companies. By the way, they manipulate the stock and a number of other things. And because I was in that company, and cash flow is always tough, I took a lot of my salary as stock. And at the time, it seemed like it was a smart thing to do. But in small companies, if it's not a publicly held company, what you have in stock isn't even worth the paper it's printed on.
Yeah.
So anyways, at the time, I probably owned, I don't know, I'll say 10% of the company, because they were using my money. And so the 2 owners, one owner wanted the other out. I thought it was unfair. I made a big stink about it. We probably had 25, 30 employees. And the one owner said, well, if that's the way you feel, you're gone too. Okay. Hey, so I left, and so my wife, Joan, was working at the time. She was working at AT&T. And so even though I was working at AT&T full-time and working at this computer company also full-time, like all
80 hours a week. Yeah.
Yeah. What I did is I quit AT&T when my wife went there, got a job there, and I went to work for the computer company, working more hours. And so that's why I was more like 60 to 80 hours at that company. And then I had like a side thing that I did with my friend Grady, doing car stuff. And so on weekends. And so what happened was, when the 2 of them split, I made a stink, like I said. So that guy was fired. And so I said, well, geez, what do the people there know? They don't know anything, because I was the, employee 1. And I was the guy that, that I'll say to myself, I knew everything, so I thought. But I said to the other guy, hey, why don't we start our own company? And all those things, all those installations and all those repairs at those sites, those were all the things I did. It wasn't they did. And we worked at a lot of big companies here in Denver. They were our account. And so what I did is with him and I, we formed a company. He was 60% owner. I was 40. We probably got up to, 15 employees. And where we set up our office was right where that other company had been in the same business park. And so, because it was close, it was a good location off of 71st and Broadway is where we were. And so we were there for a number of years. Things were good. Our business was good. I was making good money. I'm always type to have my house paid off, have all our cars paid off, type stuff. I'd never owned a new car. I'd always drove old cars because, hey, and so did my wife. And so I said, so things were good for us, making good money. And for whatever reason, my partner, his name was George, for whatever reason, he thought, hey, he should have all this. And that business, our run rate back then, we were probably doing maybe $1.5 million a year. This isn't huge money, but this was in the 80s. It was good money.
Yeah.
And so he just told me, he said, hey, had like a meeting with all the employees, and he says, hey, I'm just letting you know I'm letting Bob go. And he's just an employee, he's not an owner. I was like, what? And I mean, it was traumatic to say the least, because geez, what the heck here? So went home, didn't say anything to Joan that day. The next day I said, geez, you know what happened to me yesterday? And she was working. And we're the type, we're very conservative in how we live our life. We always lived on only one of ours paycheck. The other one we always saved. And so Joan, when she was there at AT&T, you could save 10% of your salary. And when you save 10% of your salary, the company matched another 10%. It was called ESOPs. Another one of those, even though it was a big company, and you think a big company owning all their stock is great, another one of those things that didn't work out so great. I'll tell you about that later. Anyways, so what happened was my partner George, probably his best friend, and he was 10 years older than me, George. So at the time I was 35, George was probably 45. His best friend was named Lloyd. Really nice guy. He had his own business also in town. Did more printer stuff, not really computer. And Lloyd called me and he says, what George did to you was dirty. And he says, that wasn't right. And he says, and this was maybe like 3 days later. He says, I'm just not feeling good about this. And I just can't sit back. And he says, I'm gonna pay for to go talk to our corporate attorney. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what, for someone to go out and do that for you, especially was George's friend, not mine. And I'm thinking, geez, what am I going to do? These are the little things that you see God is looking out for you. At the time, I thought, boy, am I a lucky guy. But when you reflect back on life, that's just too coincidental. People just don't do that. Someone was thumping on him, you need to do this, and go do this for Bob. Anyways, I went, he set me up with his attorney. His attorney's name was Jules Ornstein, put a name, and talked to him a few times. He said, and I went over all the facts up front. He said, if you want to go to trial on this, I'm sure they'll go to trial. You're going to spend a lot of money, but I'm sure we can win this. And so, back in that time. And so what I did is I went off and did my own thing. I started another computer company. And my computer company I started was ProTech Computer Systems, and it's still in operation today. I don't work there and I don't own anything there, but it's still there today. And I started that by myself in my basement. One of my guys that worked with me at the other company, he quit that company, and that company's name was Phoenix. He quit, came to work with me. He was like my employee one. He was going to school. And what we did is because I was the guy that sold all the service contracts, I was the guy when there was a problem, I fixed things. So what I did is I went to all our customers from the company that I started with my friend George. And I says, hey, George forced me out. If you want to stay with him, that's up to you. If you want to come with me, just come with me. I'm not going to be a lower price because I need to make money. This needs to be a professional relationship where it needs to be win-win, not only for you, but for me. I'm just starting off, but I'm letting you know that, hey, if you do this, I'll keep things going for you. And so I had a few companies jump ship right away. The majority of them, they didn't want to go with me because they thought, geez, what's going to happen? But what made sense was as time went on and they had a computer problem, they'd call me. And I'd say, well, geez, I'm not going to come over and fix their mess. If you want to sign up with me, I'll fix it, but you're going to have to be working with me. And probably, I'm not going to say every customer, but I would certainly say 90% of them left him and went to work with me. Anyways, within 3 years, he went out of business. And obviously, my business was running. And we did go to court. At the time, I probably spent, I don't know, probably $60,000. Doesn't sound like a big number today, but back then it was a big number. And he got a high-priced attorney, Denver attorney. He probably spent closer to 100. I won a judgment, and that's another thing when you win a judgment. And my judgment was 40% of the company. They valued the company at the time he ejected me, not at the time of this case, and it was valued at that $360,000 he owed me at the time of our case. When we went there, he didn't have $360,000 in assets or anything, and so our attorney put a lien on his house and started, clamping down on him on a few things. And obviously we won, not a little, but big time. Yeah. And so his wife was all upset, called and threatened us. I mean, a whole list of things. Anyways, he finally called me and he says, hey, I really want to put this behind us. Sorry for what I did. And long story short, I mean, this was really a disaster and a mess. But long story short, I said, hey, listen, I'm not looking to drive you out of business. What do you think you want to do? And so he said, hey, I'll pay you $100,000. I wanted to make it sort of painful for him.
Yeah.
And anyways, he paid me $100,000 over maybe 6 months. And I did get he wrote checks that weren't good at the time, and I'd call in, hey, when's this check going to be good? Otherwise, but long as to wrap that up and that chapter up, did get my money from him. And shortly after, he went bankrupt. And so I don't know, that was his problem. But my business, when I left it, our run rate was a little over $6 million a year. So I've been retired now 3 years. I had about 12 employees. And with my employees, what I did is when I left, I signed my stock over to the employees. And I left them some money in the company so they could still be successful. And the business is still running today, and I hope things are good for them. Once in a while, they call me, and I go over and help them out. I don't get compensated at all. I just do it, as goodwill. And, I hope things stay well. I mean, it's a tough time right now to be in business. And living in Colorado, it's not really a pro-business climate here in Colorado either. Mm-hmm. So that's tough. But, we all got challenges. And all I'll say is I've had 1, 2, 3, 4. So that Phoenix, I started with that partner, George. After that, I started ProTech on my own. It was a few years later. Had that since 1989. And I left 3 years ago. So that'd be 2022 was my last day there. And I was the sole owner, no partner, just, myself. And fronted, cash flowed, everything myself. Then I also had a business as an auto wrecking business. To me, that was a nice business to have, really, different clientele, but, a nice business, really all cash business. I did some internet selling bandwidth, did that with a friend, and that was good. We didn't do that really to make money, but just do some things. And so, that's essentially, where life has been and where life has taken me. And like I said, when I was probably maybe about 40, when I bought this house, I was 39. I had it built. And so when I turned 40, you start reflecting on life, and I had a bunch of stuff. And I said, why do I have all this? And you become slaves to your stuff. So when you have a bunch of stuff, you're worried about, the upkeep, the maintenance, the taxes, insurance. It's just a bunch of stuff. and we had rental property too. And, it just, so I make your life simple, get rid of all that. And then you sort of you look inward and you look at what's your role, or what's your relationship with, God. And then I think that's when you sort of simplify your life, and you sort of look and you sort of come to some realizations that a lot of this stuff, yeah, it's fun to have and have some good, but it's just really a boat anchor to you. And it's a ball and chain in your life. And do you really need or want that? Does that really make you more happy? So, and what, some of the fruits of the Spirit is, joy. We want peace in our life, and we want joy. And those are things that you can work on when you're not running in the rat race.
Yeah.
So
How did how did Joan feel about just the amount you were working throughout all of your career? I mean, I guess she was working as well, but you were working really long hours.
So one of the things that they say equally yoked on things. So one of the things that people sometimes don't really see or understand is, if you have a lot of money and you have a lot of time, chances are you're going to get in trouble. Bad things. You're going to think, you see all these people with money, some of the poor choices they make. For me, because I was busy doing all these things, busy working and providing for family, I didn't have a lot of time to try to get into any. So I think it was okay. Did Joan like it? I think she was okay with it. It was just the way life was. We took vacations. My first vacation I took, we were probably later 20s. We had our house paid off. We had no car payments.
Yep.
And here's what it is. That's our first vacation we took. My neighbors all had second mortgages on their house, all had car payments. That wasn't the way it was for us. I bought our first new car in probably 1996. Joan would probably remember. And it was a Toyota 4Runner, and paid cash for it. I've never bought a car that I've not paid cash. And, I do have a car that's, I have a Lamborghini.
Yeah.
And mine's, one of the 12-cylinder ones, so they're not the low-end cars to buy. And every car I ever bought, I always paid cash. I put my daughter through med school, paid money for that, cash for that. So all those things, I think God gave me those opportunities. And I think one of the things God taught me early on was, if you're making payments on something, you're a slave to that item. And if you're making payments on it, whatever the purchase price was that you paid for it, that's not what you're paying. That's not the amount you're paying for it. And so you hear some evangelists, as I'll call them, like Dave Ramsey's and some others, that talk about, hey, get out from under debt. It's a mindset, and it really is. And like I told you early on, I lived like a poor person, lived in my car. I took free showers at hotels. I bought my clothes at Goodwill. You've been to my house and you've sort of seen me, and I'm not a flashy dresser. I don't wear a lot of fancy clothes, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And what happens is the only one who cares what type car you drive is you. No one else cares. No one else cares what year it is. They might walk up and say, cool car, but really they don't care, because that's not theirs.
Yeah.
The only one who cares or worries about that, or the house you're living in or whatever, is you. And you might think it's a big deal, but you know what? It's just stuff. And when you're gone, like you said with those poker chips, you just push them in and away you go.
Yeah.
And when you're called, you don't know what day that's going to be either. So lots of, life Life is what you make it. I did throw out that I had, there was 5 siblings in my family. Of the 5, my sister was married for less than a year, never got remarried. She never had any kids. And I told you my 3 brothers, they've already passed. They all passed very early in life. My brother that was 2 years younger than me, he passed at age 32. My brother that was 10, and he died here in Aurora. It was tragic. He was shot and killed with a knife. My brother that was, and him, his name was David. That was lifestyle. So, and for what it was worth, the police never found who did that. And at the time when he passed, paid for his funeral, paid for a lot of things back then. The police just said, well, he was a bartender and he was doing drugs, and hey, even though he was killed in his own place, they did nothing. My next brother that died was my youngest brother, 10 years younger than me. He died right at about the age of 40, never married either. He died in a plane crash. Had his girlfriend in the plane with him. He was a heavy drinker. At his place where he worked, he had a refrigerator with a beer tap on it, and just as their lifestyle. And I used to talk to them about it, but when you're an adult, you make your own choices. So he died in a plane crash. He was a pilot. That wasn't what his job was, but he had an airplane with a pilot. Unfortunately, he passed, and so did his girlfriend that was in the plane. And that was sort of a mess here in Denver, because he lived in Denver, and it was just a mess.
Yeah.
His name was Jim. My third brother was my middle. He was 2 brothers down from me, Mike, and he died. He felt life was meaningless in a lot of ways. I actually had him work for me for a short while, maybe about a year or so. His perspective on life was not straight. He felt, felt really entitled on a lot of things. Anyways, long story short, he died at about the age of 50, maybe 55. And what he did is he committed suicide. Sad, and because he was so dead set against guns, he did it with a knife, killed himself with a knife.
Yeah.
Pretty brutal. So, you pay for funerals. I paid for 3 funerals. Paid for a private investigator on my brother with the plane crash. It's life. Everyone has a story. Nothing's easy. It's how we see things. With those things happening to my brother, I look back today and reflect and say, even though when my dad told me to leave, and I thought it was so terrible, really it was the best thing he did for me.
Yeah.
Because he saved my life. Had I been there when he was shooting people, chances are I'd be dead today.
Yeah.
Chances are I wouldn't have had the life I have. And those are the things that all people should take time and reflect on the good things in life. The bad things, we've been told different things. Maybe those are given to us, put in our life to show us how good the good things really are. And so what we need to do is we need to be thankful for the blessings we've all been given.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you say a lot that's the way things are, but I think it also overlooks the fact that you're very resilient, I think. I think a lot of the stuff that you went through could have been very traumatic, probably was, and had a lot of impact on your life. And I think we just see a lot of young people who might have like anxiety or are scared of certain things and think that the world sucks, right? Mm-hmm. And you could have had so many times in your life where you could have said, the world sucks, it's not my fault, because it wasn't your fault. None of it was. It was all just
life.
What happened.
It's called life.
Yeah, you could have at any point taken the position of being a victim and just allowed it to take over your life, and somehow you didn't, which I think is very impressive and is underspoken in the way you talk about it.
Well, like I said, life is different today. Yeah. And you hear the young people say they have anxiety over this. that wasn't a word that was used very often when I was growing up. Deal with it. And bad things happened not only to me, but to other people in school and ours where we were at. And it was, I'll just, a little side note. When I lived in New Jersey, I remember my dad was in the military. He was at Otis Air Force Base. And I was in elementary school, went there until I was sixth grade. In sixth grade, we moved then to North Dakota. But I remember someone died at the Vietnam War. I don't remember who it was, but it was a kid that was in my class in school. And I think they had three kids. I don't remember, three kids. I know one of them was a boy. And someone died in a family where it sort of makes sense it was the dad. I think it was the mom that died. And the reason why I say that was the three kids got split up and they got put into someone else's houses, and they all of a sudden were living in a different family. And it wasn't adoption, and they weren't living with family. They were just living in someone else's house. And that's the way things were done back then. It's such a different time in the way things are. And I never knew what happened to any of those kids, because when you're in the military and constantly moving, your friends are just friends for a few years. But I know that on that situation, whatever happened to them, if the parents or grandparents or whatever, but, it's just a different time. And there wasn't any, well, I got anxiety, I have to counseling, or we didn't have any of that. And if someone died, and I remember in high school, someone did die, they went on the intercom and they said, whatever it was, David died in a car accident, died in, this or whatever it was. They just gave it as high level, and we're no longer going to see him in school. That's all that was said. There was no crying. There was no one, we're going to send, everyone's going to sign a sympathy card. We're going to do a vigil. It was just amazing how things were then as to how it is today.
Yeah. And of course, I don't want to gloss over that there is some value in people being able to be open about their emotions, be vulnerable, get therapy, and take all of these things in stride. But there is some portion of it where humanity in general just is resilient, and some things don't always need to be dealt with. Some things can be taken, take the hit, and then go forward. Yeah.
If you look, what I always reflected on and thought, we all think whatever we're going through in life is difficult. We all do, and it's just human nature. But if you look at the guy next to you and you see the cross he's carrying, you think, geez, maybe it isn't so bad. And you might say, oh, geez, Bob, look how bad yours was. But I used to reflect back then, look at the Holocaust survivors. Choke up a little bit on some of that. Those people had horrendous, and it wasn't just something that happened for this moment or something that happened for a day. It went on for years. They suffered. Mm-hmm. Family members killed. And so my wife and I, we've been to Germany and been to Dachau and saw some of that. And it's just amazing how those people, and you don't hear them shouting out or getting angry or anything. And it's because, like I told you at the time, those were bad things that happened, but you don't want to ruin anyone else's life, so you just kept it to yourself. And those people had quite the cross to carry. And what we heard when we went to Germany from these people is just amazing how everyone in Germany knew what was going on. And we think on concentration camps, there's only a handful that we think about, but there was thousands of concentration camps. And everyone that they didn't like, Jewish criminals, etc., were involved in these. So it's really a horrendous time in society. And if we can learn anything from it, we can learn that, hey, we're all just people. We're all on this journey. None of us are better than anyone else. What we need to try to do is love and care for one another. And that is what Jesus preached the whole time he was here on this earth.
Mm-hmm. So. When you think back at a high level, mm-hmm. at the life you've lived, and I guess seeing the younger generation, modern context, what are some unexpected lessons that you think can be reapplied for the youth today?
So back when we were younger, we sort of made our own fun times. So if we had a ball, it sounds so crazy. If we had a ball, that's all we had. And we'd all play with that ball. Kick it, throw it, hit it up in the air. And we didn't all have baseball bats, maybe it'd be a stick or whatever. Today, we have too much, and the kids are too much, in my opinion, in their phones, their iPads, as opposed to interacting more with each other. Obviously, like I said, I have one daughter. She's now 41. We have two grandkids. Two of her kids. One of them's 10, and the other is 9 and 6. She hasn't turned 10 yet. Going to do that soon. And what I see as parents, so from my standpoint, we have to raise our children and to the best of our ability. I think parents try that. Maybe they're not perfect at it. But then again, as grandparents, we also need to take time and try to invest in our grandkids and try to teach them some things that they need to do and try to guide them on the path. And so whenever we're out there where we see it's a real value to be a consistent churchgoer, we feel bad if we don't miss church, is what I'm going to say. So when we're back visiting with our daughter and her family, they don't take the same approach, same value in going to services as we do. And so we always take the grandkids with us to church. And we're trying to get them to see that, but young people don't. It's hard for them, and it'd be nice if they would. And though we're Catholic, like we saw, Jesus was Jewish. And St. Paul, he was also Jewish, but he wasn't of the same Jewish faith as Jesus. There was Zealots, there was Sadducees, there was Pharisees, there was the Essenes, and John the Baptist, being the way he lived his life, he was probably of the Essene sect. So you look at all these different things, and I do think people need to look and try to understand that there is something bigger than just them in this place that we call Earth. So, yeah, that's.
We have a tradition on the podcast where at the end of the episode, we ask the guest to participate in a carrots and sticks challenge. And as you know, the podcast is about living courageously. And so the guest usually challenges themselves with a 1 to 2 week challenge, which is about living courageously. And that can be personal for yourself. It can be more broad. Maybe it's something you're avoiding. And then the stick is your own self-chosen punishment if you don't do it. And you can have some time to think if you want as well. I had a guest on who was like, I've been avoiding going to the gym for the past year, and I'm starting to do that now. So he went three times for the following 2 weeks.
Go to the gym.
Yeah, but that's just like, that can be impersonal, and then for some people it's very personal.
Okay.
Like with one guest we had her talk about how she's mean to herself, and her challenge was to pay attention to those moments when she has negative self-talk and write them down.
Yeah, good. So based on a challenge, I think what I'm going to try and do is I have a number of friends that I haven't seen or visited with in some period of time. And what happens is, even though you're older and retired, you think, oh, I have all this time on my hands. But instead of getting things done quicker, for whatever reason, it seems to take longer. They always say, give busy people a task and they can get it done. So what my challenge is I'm going to try and visit some friends that I've known their spouse has passed or other family members has passed, just to let them know I care. We do send cards, but I do feel that just based on our little short talk here, I'm certainly going to do that. And this is a good time of year, and I have reached out to some of them already. Excuse me. But I do think we just need to share time, and that is probably the biggest gift you can give to anyone is some of your time. So that's what I'm going to try and do. I've belonged to a number of different men's groups, and I do think that's a good challenge for guys to do. And what it does is it helps keep you on the straight path.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to get off the path because life gets messy. And life gets messy, our marriages, our relationships get messy. And I do think if you can stay on the right path, and men's groups do help you do that, and they do challenge you to stay there. So I'm going to say that's what I got.
Okay. And what does that look like? A few phone calls, or does that look like?
Oh, I'm going to have
planning out
phone
a
call.
day?
Okay, so what does it look like? I'm certainly going to reach out to these people. I'm going to get, I have probably like 3 or 4 that I know of for sure. And I'm going to not only phone calls, but I'm going to meet them for lunch and let them know that, hey, I care, and that, hey, if you need something, give me a call.
Yeah.
And that way I can stay in touch with them. And it is things we need to do more to one another and for one another. And it's things for whatever reason, we just don't. We just get comfortable. It's just surprising how life is,
Yeah.
And yet, so I will just summing up. When I was younger, I used to think, geez, when I'm 20 or 21, life's going to be so much simpler for me. And then there was a whole list of other problems. And I did go to college, and I did get a 4-year degree. I did that at night school. My wife and I did it together. I graduated at age 40 with that. But I used to think life was so much simpler. Then I thought, well, maybe when I get to be 40, it's got to be easier. Well, then maybe once my daughter is out of the house, that's got to be. But for some reason, life never gets what I will call simple. Life is what I will call messy, and there is always challenges day to day. And so not every day is a sunny day, even though some are, and enjoy those. And those are the days that are blessings, and, make the most of them. But even at my age, I'll be 70 here in a few months. We're all faced with challenges, and the challenges you're faced when you get older is generally health challenges. And it's surprising how those challenges, where you never thought of them when you were younger, is now challenges that are real in your life today that require attention. So
Yeah.
essentially but I'm going to certainly reach out to those friends. I have one, his name is Craig, one, his name is Sig. We have a lady friend named Marge that her husband had passed. Craig, his wife, had passed. So, and make sure and let them know that I care and spend time with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what is your stick, your self-chosen punishment if you don't do it?
I'm a driven person, so it's going to happen. You could say whatever.
But it won't matter because you'll do it.
I'm going to matter to do it. I don't know. I'll say penance. I'll say do the rosary, but I don't consider that penance because my wife and I, we try to do that daily anyways. But we'll say that.
Okay.
I'll say
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, where can people find you if you want to be found? If you want people to talk to you?
Oh, you mean on give them an email address?
Yeah, social, email.
I am on Facebook, but I don't post much. I'm probably the wrong generation for that. I am in some car hobbies. And so if you want to find me, I could give you my email address. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. My email address is pretty simple. It's Bob, B-O-B, and my domain name for the email is one I use for my company, Protec. So it is PROTSYS.com. So Bob at the first 4 characters in the word Protec, that's P-R-O-T, the first 3 in the word system, altogether.com. So Bob at protsys.com.
Awesome.
So yeah, hopefully, and back in the day when you had computers way back when, domain names couldn't be greater than the 7 characters. They all had to be a .com. And so they were all, today it's all changed, but I've had that email address since 1989.
Dang.
Yeah, so yeah, So that's what it is. So if someone wants to reach out to me, and anyone who does, I'll certainly respond.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on, Bob. This has been great.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for coming by and visiting. It's
Yep.
great.